Hello, hello. My name is Michelle Drew, and I'm your host here on From a Mess to a Message, where I interview inspiring people who have been through a messy time in their life and they've come through to the other side with a message of hope and inspiration. Today's guest is a successful entrepreneur who I met through a networking group. But when we hopped on Zoom to talk about, our businesses, I learned that she had lost a sister, her little sister, in a drunk driving accident. So I asked her if she would please share that story with you all today. So I'd like to welcome my friend Deanna Russo to the interview today, or to the channel today. Deanna, thank you so much for agreeing to relive this story with us today. And I feel like the ripple effect could be massive if we can encourage one person not to get behind the wheel of a car when they
That's the
really
ultimate
should.
goal. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the ultimate goal is just
yeah,
one. I don't expect every person who's hearing this to get it, but if one person thinks twice,
yeah.
message and mission accomplished.
Yes, yes, for sure. So take us back to that fateful day when you and your family got word, and to take us through that experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
So March 6th, 1998 was the day that everything changed. No one wakes up at the beginning of the day thinking that everything is going to change by midnight that night, but
Mm.
it's true. It's really like it was a day that I'll never forget, and that it's a hard day every single time it comes down on the calendar. And what happened was my sister was 18 years old, and she was home from visiting on spring break. She was visiting from because she had been a freshman. She's a freshman at college. And she was supposed to go back to school 2 days later. So this is a Friday night. And back in 1998, there were no cell phones, and really, it was all about landlines. So she called multiple people and tried to make plans to see them before she headed back to school, because she lived at a campus that was about an hour or so away, and it just wasn't, she was dorming there and it wasn't as easy to see everybody. So she wanted to catch up with friends. And so she had called over all over town looking to go out with people on a Friday night. And so when I called my parents' house, it was supposed to be just a short phone call. And I had a question for my mother. And the phone didn't even ring a full ring. She jumped on it, and you could tell in her voice the anxiety and the excitement. And she said, "Hello." And I said, "Hi, is mom there? Can I talk to mom?" And she's like, "Oh, it's just you." We both laughed. We had seen each other the day before. I had brought over laundry to my parents' house, and so I obviously wasn't the person she was waiting to hear from. And if given my choice, if given the choice, that wouldn't have been my perfect last conversation. Oh, it's just you. There would be so much more that I'd want to say to her, so much more that I'd want to tell her, that not a minute will go by, not a second will go by where I won't think about her, and that I will continue to tell her story as long as I am physically able to. But I wasn't given that choice. So eventually that phone did ring, and it was her friend Katie. And the two girls had made the plan to go out. They went to the mall. Really nothing super significant, just a couple of friends having a lot of fun. And they bumped into my parents at the mall, and my parents were headed to a movie. And my dad, as he often does, got all authoritative, as parents do, and reminded Karen that she had a curfew. And she rolled her eyes, and just probably the same rolling of the eyes that she gave when she said, "Oh, it's just you." She rolled her eyes and said, "Okay, okay, I'll be home." But instead of coming home from that movie to find Karen watching TV, listening to music, doing whatever 18-year-old girls do on a Friday night, they came home to a blinking light on their answering machine. Now, here we are all of these years later, and they still have that answering machine. And so every single time I have to get to leave a message for them, I always have to start out, it's not an emergency. Because even all these years later, whenever they get a message, they instantly go back to that night. So the message on the machine was that it was a nurse and that they were to go to the hospital immediately. And so my phone rang at 12:22 in the morning, and my mother told me to go to the hospital because that's all they were told. They didn't give any other information, any other details. So my then boyfriend, now husband, and I got there first. We were just down the street from the hospital, and we walked in, and I told the people at the front desk who I was and who I was there to see, and they took me from one waiting room to another. And on the way, we passed by dozens of police officers, and I didn't even put the two and two together. I didn't think that they were all there for my sister, but they were. They said, you have to wait here in this second waiting room until your parents get here. And so here am I, 22 years old, and I just didn't understand why they weren't taking me right to her. I'm her big sister. It was just the two of us girls growing up together. So I'm the protector. I'm the one who's going to give her a hug and say everything is going to be okay. And that's what my job was at that point. That's what I thought that I was there to do, was just give her a hug and say everything is going to be okay. So it wasn't until they took us to the second waiting room where I was really, really upset and starting to get super nervous. And then my parents walked in, and they said, the investigator walked in, didn't even like come into the room completely. I almost see it like a scene from a movie where it's a slow-mo and they zoom into the face, and because I can't forget his face. And he said there was an accident and Karen didn't make it. And I've talked to police officers since that time, because I tell my story to offenders, to police, to community groups, to high schoolers. And they've asked me, police officers have come up and asked me, what is the better way for us to say this? And I said, no matter what he would have said, those words would still be echoing in my head. But there was an accident and Karen didn't make it.
Wow.
And things changed.
Do you think that if he had come in, sat across from you, looked you in the eyes, and been a little bit more caring about it, I mean, the words are still the words, but do you think that the delivery might have made it a little bit better?
Possibly.
It feels like it would have.
Possibly, yeah.
That just sounds very cold. I hope he's not watching, but it sounds very cold.
No, he's probably long retired or might even be gone at this point because it's been so long.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was that Katie and Karen were at the mall, and then they went back to Katie's house, and Katie's mom asked them to pick up her grandma. It was supposed to be just a short errand. And then the plan afterwards was that the two girls were going to get milkshakes. That was Karen's favorite treat. Like, she just loved her milkshakes. And so they were driving. Katie was driving and Karen was sitting in the front passenger seat. And it was a 2-lane street in the city of Buffalo. And they were headed southbound. Another driver was headed northbound, and there was parked cars on either side. It was one of those city streets where it was like 30 miles per hour. There's not a lot of room we're not talking a busy highway. So the driver crossed over the double yellow line because the car in front of him was apparently going too slow. Crossed over the double yellow line, going, police said, about 55 in a 30. And Katie could not move her car out of the way quick enough. It all happened so fast. And the force of the impact sent both cars flying over to the side of the road where a parked car was hit too. Luckily, no one was in the parked car. But the severity of her injuries, the EMTs got her heart started 3 times as they took the shortcut through the park to the hospital. And that was our way of our kind of our message of saying that she wasn't ready at that point. She was fighting it. She was 18 years old,
Yeah.
physically fit, like really fighting this. But it was too much.
Yeah.
The crash destroyed her heart, her liver, her kidneys, basically bled to death.
Oh my gosh.
When, after they told us at the hospital, my mom and I think it was my mother more than I think just the shock. We walked in to her room. My mom wanted to see her because literally my parents didn't believe it because they had just seen her at the mall.
Right.
So
right.
they thought for sure that they had the wrong person. So we walked in, and the only mark on her was the bruise from the seatbelt, because my dad was constantly reminding us that we were buckled in. And everything else was all internal. It was all internal injuries.
Wow.
Katie survived. The drunk driver survived. He pled guilty and was sentenced 5 to 15 years in jail. He was released 10 years after he was originally sentenced. On the day that he was released, I was at a high school telling Karen's story. And I looked up at the clock and I said, and now he's out. Now he goes on to life as normal. The kicker part of this entire story, one of the most interesting parts of it, is that he was actually getting his car serviced earlier that day. And the worker had seen when he was cashing out that he didn't look like he had all of his faculties. He didn't look like he should be driving. So that worker of the service place called police, and police came and gave him all of the sobriety tests. He blew a .04 BAC at that point, which wasn't legally drunk in 1998, and it's not legally drunk now. Right. But he was driving without a license, without registration. The car wasn't even insured under his name. He shouldn't have been driving. So that police department held him an $80 fine. So somehow between 4:30 in the afternoon and 9:30 at night, 5 hours, he got bonded out of jail, got his keys, got his car, stopped at a bar to drink more, and came flying down the street and crashed into Katie's car. Wow. He blew a .14 after the crash.
Oh, so. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So fast forward to today. I know that you're a huge advocate for this. And so I love it when people have such a horrible thing happen and they make something of it. They take that story and they do good as a result of it. And I know that Katie's looking down and she's so proud of you as her
Karen,
big sister.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, sorry.
Karen's my sister. Katie was her friend.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm sure that she is so proud of you and looking down and just so blessed to have you as a big sister.
It was always Karen and Deanna. It was always Karen and Deanna, and her initials are KK, and her nickname was Doubles, and she always called me D. And the only time when I'm telling her story, I can get through the crash, I can get through what kind of relationship we had growing up, 18 years. And I treasure those 18 years. The only time that I get really emotional, Michelle, is when I start talking about my kids, because there's a relationship there that never will be. Yeah. They'll never get to know the beautiful girl that I called my sister, the beautiful friend to so many people. We had hundreds of people show up at the funeral and wake. We had buses come from the college that she attended south of Buffalo, and she was only a freshman.
Wow.
And it was just a testament to just what an amazing, and my kids will see pictures and they'll hear
Mm,
stories, but they'll never get to meet and
right.
have a relationship with the person that I loved.
Right.
And it's not just when people talk about the victims of drunk driving. In this case, there's
Right.
so many. Her friends, Katie, who had to sit there and watch her friend die, she was so out of it at the crash that she was telling the EMTs that that was Katie and she was Karen. It took them a while before they could figure out who was who. Katie's parents went to the hospital thinking she was gone. Like it was
Wow.
just crazy. It's crazy the circumstances and just how the spider web effect.
Right.
So it was,
Right.
and my parents having to go and pick out a tombstone for their baby.
Oh,
They whenever they go to the cemetery, there are their names. They're going to be buried with Karen.
yeah.
It's surreal. It's
Yeah.
surreal, and they haven't been the same people since. No matter what I try to do, and no matter the joy that they get from the grandkids that I was able to get them,
Yeah.
they still know that an important person is not part of their lives anymore.
Yeah. And
All
that's
these years
something I
later.
think people forget, that you don't forget. Like every holiday, every birthday, every big event that Karen would have been part of, it's like salt on the wound. It's like, yep, she's missing. Yep, we lost her. And people forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had I interviewed someone who lost a son, and she said something to me that changed me forever. She said, Michelle, people avoid talking about our people who we lost, but all we want to do is talk about them. We want
yeah,
to keep their spirit alive, their story alive.
yep,
And I will never shy away from talking about someone
yep.
who's passed on.
Yeah. Same with
Yeah.
me. Same with me. I feel like every single time I tell people what type of person she was, she majored in sports medicine in
Mm,
college. She wanted to take care of players when they got hurt. I mean,
mm,
she had just been named as trainer to the school softball team before this whole thing had happened. And she played softball for 12 years. So she like found that out and she was so excited. She didn't go to school on a scholarship or for the athletics, but to be named as trainer to a team that she was really proud of, that sport, of having competed for all those years. She played
right.
for like since she was six to up to varsity in high school.
Wow.
And it's just like that, the opportunity to tell her story.
Mhm.
I just I just want people to know that she was an amazing person who's no longer here because of someone's choice.
Yeah.
It's so preventable. It's
Yeah.
so preventable.
Yeah. So fast forward to today.
Yeah,
Tell us some of the things that you do to keep her alive. You kind of touched on a little bit, but I know you get out into the community
I
and
do.
yeah, tell us
I
about
do.
that.
I've spoken to high schools. I've told, and the thing about telling kids is that when I say she's 18 and
Yeah.
I tell them what kind of person she was and what kind of friend she was, they see a little bit of themselves in her. So I really enjoy talking to the high schoolers, but I also tell offenders her story. And I tell them, you may not think of it now. You may think of all the costs that go into it and all of the legal problems, but this is a second chance. This is a
Mm,
second chance that you are being given.
yeah.
That in this case, he went right to jail like within months of the crash. So he was never given that. Well, he was given second chances leading up to it,
Yeah.
um, but it's something like you really. I don't expect every single person to get it. I said it at the beginning. I don't expect every single person to get it, but I expect, hopefully, over the years, maybe a handful of people. There was one girl who came up to me and said that she went to the same college as Karen. And she said, every single time I look at my ring, I'll think of her.
Wow.
And that was years ago that she said that, and I'll never forget it. I'll
Wow.
never forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just hope my words can make an impact. And
Yeah.
they call them, when the offenders are sentenced there, they call them victim impact panels. And it's so true that
Mm,
hopefully they can get the impact of what a victim like me has gone through.
right.
And I'm hoping eventually to put this into a book that I could tell Karen's story
Yeah.
and not settle so much on the grief part of it, but just the strength that I have gotten over the years because
Mm,
I'm able to tell her story, and that I have this mission
right.
because I just want to change lives through the story. I just
Yeah.
want to I want people to understand what kind of awesome person she was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping at some point to write it all down.
Oh, I think that's great. And if you save one life because of the outreach that you're doing, the ripple of effect of that is just as huge as the ripple effect of losing Karen,
Right.
right? Because the ripple effect,
Right.
I mean, it still goes on and on,
Mm-hmm.
and
Same
your
type of
kids,
thing.
yeah, your kids are
Spider
going to
web
have
effect.
kids, and
Yep.
and your parents, like you say, are not the same. And at this point, they're probably never going to be the same,
Nope.
you know.
Nope.
So if you can make that effect on the positive end,
Yeah.
kudos to you. Thank God for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
try. I try. It
yeah,
just I want people to know what just a beautiful person she was. I wrote her the song called Count on Me. It was a Whitney Houston song. It was in the soundtrack to Waiting to Exhale. And I wrote her the lyrics to that song as she graduated from high school, and how I wanted her to know how much that she could count on me, regardless of where our paths were in life. Because I graduated from college, she graduated the high school. And it was like at that year, 1997 into 1998, we totally became adults. Like, one thing my
yeah,
dad told us as we were growing up is be nice to your sister. She's the only one you got. And
yeah,
now I find myself saying that
yeah,
to my kids. And it's it's crazy how if you hear music, you get
yeah,
signs now. Like, we get
yeah,
signs from bunnies and butterflies, and we get signs if we happen to be listening to something and some song comes on that either she listened to and she really loved, or
yeah,
that just the lyrics speak. It
yes,
just I get my signs from her all over the
yeah.
place.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. A lot of people would be blind to those signs and
Yeah,
not notice them.
I'm open.
Yeah,
Show me you're here. Show me you're here.
yeah.
Mhm.
You got me all teary over here.
Yeah.
It's all good. I'm not afraid to
That
cry.
song, I'm telling you, I cannot even hold it
Woo.
in. That song is just, yeah,
Yeah,
every time I hear it, I instantly go back to writing that up and putting it
yeah.
into a frame for her. And yeah, now
Wow.
I have it. So
Yeah, yeah. Whew. So what can what do you recommend to people? Like when you're going out and you're speaking, what tips do you give people, if any?
there's so many alternatives. There's so many, like, back in 1998, there was no Uber, there was no
Right.
Lyft. There's just so many people, loved ones would much rather be woken up in the middle of the night. I tell kids this.
Yeah.
Your parents would much rather be woken up in the middle of the night from a phone call from you saying that you needed a ride,
Yes.
and that your friend was just wasted or just had too much to drink, and know that you could get home safely,
Yeah.
than
Yes.
getting a call from a nurse at the hospital or getting a knock on the door from police officers.
Yeah.
It's just there's just so many alternatives.
Yeah.
And I tell people I have no problems with going to the parties and going and drinking responsibly. Just set up a game plan before then, so that you know how you'll get home and how everyone with you will get home.
Yeah.
That's all. Just make
Yeah.
it's a choice in the
Right.
end. It is a choice that you can set up at the beginning to
Yes.
make sure this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're
Yeah.
getting home.
Yeah, because even getting into the car with someone who's been drinking and that person's driving,
Right.
that's the same thing. You know, your
Yep.
parents would much rather come and get both of you
Yep.
than to get that phone call.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you're doing. And I think it's so important for young people, offenders, all of that to hear from someone who has had an experience like you've had. And,
It's
again,
preventable. It's
uh-huh, a
preventable. And I'm
hundred
gonna,
percent.
I mean, it's been happening for so long now, and I'm just gonna keep talking about it and
Yeah.
keep telling her story until it no longer is an issue. It
Yeah.
no longer happens. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not so much about, like I said, the drinking or even the drugs at this point. There's
Right.
so many ways to impair your abilities
Yeah.
as it is just make a plan. Just
Yeah.
make a plan and know that you'll be home safe and everyone on the road with you will be safe because Michelle, she wasn't drinking.
Right.
Katie wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
Like, not only are you making sure that you and your loved ones and your friends are okay, but everyone on the road with you
Right.
will be okay. Because how many innocent people
Yeah.
are going about their day
Yes.
and they're involved in these crashes?
Yeah. And like that, life changes
Yep.
for so
Yep.
many people.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just so much the deaths, it's also the injuries. I
Hmm.
mean, the people that they're physically malformed because of these things. I knew someone who lost a leg from an impaired driver. And Katie, my sister's friend, she suffered a broken nose, and on almost on the 10-year anniversary she had surgery so she can kind of smell the same way again. She is a teacher in a high school, and in the middle of class sometimes she'll just have to sit down because her knee is still bothering her all of
Wow.
these years later. So
Yeah.
it's just the physical and the mental part of it too,
Yeah.
having to sit
Right.
there and watch. I mean, it's
Right.
crazy. It's just, it's not, it's preventable. That's
Right.
the
Easily
end game.
preventable.
Yep.
Yeah. Like you say, with Uber and Lyft, spend the $20 to get home.
Right.
Yeah. Crazy, crazy. So, Dina, where can people find you, and what message would you like to share with people? Your
Yeah.
message of hope and inspiration. What would you
Right.
like to share with people?
Yeah. My business is all centered around LinkedIn, and I am a LinkedIn strategist, a LinkedIn coach, a LinkedIn trainer. I don't talk a lot about my sister on LinkedIn except for the anniversary. And
Oh,
that is the day that I tell the story and I pretty much clear everything I'm doing on that day. And because it's a really hard day to get through, but I tell her story and I share a picture, and it's one of the biggest, most viewed posts that I do on an annual basis because people relate with the human side of
yes.
it, the human story side. So if
Yeah.
you go to leverageupllc.com, you'll see the LinkedIn side of things. And then you go to guest appearances and a whole bunch of podcasts. And some of them have been talking about my sister.
Oh,
So
good.
I kind of mix it up. The speaking gigs I do are majority on LinkedIn, but also I go out and speak to teenagers, community groups, and I just want to, I can speak on how I've grown on LinkedIn and how I use a triangle strategy to help people
Yeah.
to and to train and to coach on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
But also I bring up my sister every so often and tell her story as well.
Mhm.
So
That's so good. That's so good. So, what message would you like to leave people with? Whether it be people who might get behind the wheel of a car or people who have lost, like you have lost.
mhm.
What message would you like to put
I
out there?
think there's two
Okay.
messages are make a plan
Hmm.
and set aside time to do the right thing before
Yeah.
you know that you're going to be in that situation
Yeah.
and scenario. But also, the second one is the grief doesn't have to define you.
Mm,
It's about the strength that you get from whatever happens to you. It's not so much about what happens as it is how you react to it and what you do with it. And for me, I feel like I've gotten stronger
mm,
over the past 20 some odd years
yeah.
because of this. I feel like every single time that I can tell her story, that I feel the strength to keep telling it because I
Yeah.
know that I'm making a difference. And
Yeah.
people have said it too. So that helps.
That's huge. That's huge and so true. Thank you so much for being so transparent and vulnerable in sharing your story. I believe that you are going to change more than one life.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah,
I appreciate you inviting me.
you bet. We'll talk soon.